Let's talk about three things that got me through 19 years in prison that still benefit me to this day. They're meditation, exercise, and reading. That may seem simple, but what I found is all the complicated things, all the complex things, are really just a combination of all the basic things. Now, meditation was the thing I credit most, changing my life, helping me get through, and helping me come out a better person. And this isn't religious meditation. I started on a Buddhist path, but I don't care if it's mindfulness-based stress reduction, if it's Buddhist, if it's Christian. I knew people of all faiths or no faiths at all who found benefit in taking that pause. Because what I never knew how to do in my life was just stop, how to be still, how to not keep running or keep swimming like a shark who felt like he was going to drown and he was going to die. And I was learning to stop and face the things that I was running from. Because all the things I did, all the craziness, all the violence, all the crime, all the drugs, was just an attempt to escape what I was feeling, to not feel what I was feeling. And meditation was the opportunity to say, you know what? I'm going to sit here. Like, this is radical acceptance. I am feeling this. I am in this situation. I am going to have this experience. And it's profoundly uncomfortable. That's why nobody wants to meditate. That's why people don't like to sit still, because it's hard. It's one of the most uncomfortable things in the world to just stop and feel. But what I found was, first, the most effective thing we can do is stop and face it. And secondly, the more we do it, the more it becomes a practice, and the more we recognize that feelings are not facts. So when I'm feeling scared, that doesn't mean there's something wrong. When I'm feeling sad, that doesn't mean I'm broken and my life is over. When I'm feeling angry, it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It means I'm having a feeling. And as I started to identify that, I allowed those feelings to kind of come, and they wash like a wave over me. Whereas I used to try to hold them back, and they would get bigger and bigger and bigger and have more force until they came exploding out. And I fell into a deep depression, or I felt absolutely enraged, or I didn't know how to deal with those things. So it was one of the things that benefited me the most, and it really didn't matter how I did it. Again, I started out with like a Theravada Buddhist practice, then I went to Zen. I tried a variety of different things, but the point was to sit here, to feel my body, to be there. And people who have extreme trauma, I want to be fair, often using the body as an anchor is not a good idea because there's been so much so much trauma trapped in the body. Like if you read The Body Keeps a Score, trauma is actually physically trapped in the body. There are other ways to center there, but I've done all types of non-dual practices, Zen koans, anything you can think of. But what it comes back to is, can I sit here? Can I be present with what is? And when those voices rise up, when those things come into my existence, when they come into my space, can I sit with them? Can I not necessarily believe them, but also not reject them? Most profound things I've found. So I went through periods where I would meditate 3 times a day for 20 minutes. There were times where I would do 2 times a day for an hour. There were times I would do entire meditation retreats. We would lock down for a week. The day we locked down, I would sit down and I would sit there until the end of the day. Next morning, I would get up and I would sit till the end of the day. And every 20 or 30 minutes, depending on what kind of break I was doing for my meditation, I would get up and I would walk mindfully and I would get back in bed. And if they served a meal, I would eat mindfully. But I wouldn't watch TV, I wouldn't read, I wouldn't talk to myself, or I wouldn't do anything. I would just meditate and walk mindfully. And in some ways that's extreme. In some ways I've realized it's complicated, but there was such a benefit to my life. Like who I was 5 years after doing that versus who I was before are two radically different people. And it's one of the things that I've struggled with because since getting out, I haven't been able to maintain that level of practice. I haven't done a single meditation retreat. I was actually on my way to one and I wrecked my motorcycle, so I obviously didn't get to go. But what I found is that when in my day or in my week or any part of my life, I make the conscious choice to pause. So whether that means I got up this morning and I sat for 20 minutes and I did a formal practice, or every time something struggle or difficult or uncomfortable came up, I sat with it. I said, you know what, I'm going to take 5 minutes before I react on this. Or I got this really difficult text and I'm really struggling with this emotion. I'm going to take 5 minutes before I do anything with that. I don't advocate for one style or one form. What I found is we include the practice of a pause in our lives. It dramatically changes the way we experience our lives and the way we live our lives. Now, the second thing that was so fundamental in prison was exercise. And I think it's really based on this idea that acute stress scrubs away chronic stress. Because prison is both an incredibly stressful and somehow an incredibly boring environment. But that chronic stress weighs on you. I mean, you just see the effect that it has on people. Think of somebody who works 80 hours a week or who has 17 kids, or it just weighs on you and eats you alive. And I had to find a way to deal with that. Initially, exercise for me was about gaining size and gaining strength because I was a 150-pound 18-year-old kid in an adult prison and didn't know what to do with myself. But eventually what I realized is I needed this for my mental health. I needed this for all the stressful times and the stressful things that came up. And when I did it regularly, just like with meditation, when I engaged in this, it became a habit. It became unusual to not exercise. And I did all sorts of things. I had periods when I only did calisthenics, only push-ups and pull-ups and air squats and running. I had periods when I tore my rotator cuff and I couldn't lift. I only ran and I got down to, bone thin and absolutely small. At other times where I lifted heavy and got really big and got really strong. At other times I did CrossFit. The whole point was to engage in a really, really difficult thing. And I always liked to work out in the morning if I could. Because if I start off by doing something incredibly difficult, whether it's doing burpees in my cell at 6 in the morning or it's going out to the weight pile early, by the time I'm done, before the day has ever really started, I've already done something really difficult. So everything after that seems much less difficult. It's like if we start out the day with something really easy, well, everything after that's harder. But if we start out the day with something really difficult, everything after that's that much easier. And I always found that really helpful, and that's why I still work out early in the morning now. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I go to the gym, I do lifts, and I finish off with burpees. Tuesday and Thursday, I do jiu-jitsu at 6 a.m., and then I try to go to later classes sometime throughout the week, but things are just so busy I haven't been able to do it. What I found is, like, when I had my accident and I couldn't exercise, my mental health struggled, like, really suffered. And it's not just that, because obviously there was a combination, but the more I can continue to include exercise in my life, the more I make it a regular part of my daily practice, my daily routine, the better I feel. And I think it's incredibly important to recognize that physical exercise isn't just about the body, it's also about the mind. And the third thing was reading. Because I was locked in a place with limited education myself, as well as surrounded by people who, for the most part, had limited education. I was limited in the conversations I could have. I was limited in the experiences I could have or the places I could go. What I could do was read a book, and I could have conversations with someone who lives thousands of miles away, who's long dead. I could have these experiences and learn about a place and feel a place. And those were always the fiction books that I loved, the ones where, like, I could read it and I could feel myself there. I could feel the experience of whatever they were doing or wherever they were, or whatever people they were around. I found that really, really important. But there were all these different things. The point was that I read 2 to 3 books a week. I would go to the library. At first, we could borrow 2 books a week. Then it went to 3. And I would always make myself the deal that I have to get one nonfiction, and then when I finished that, I could get the fiction. Like, so what if I want to read, like, a Jack Reacher book or whatever? I have to read my nonfiction first. And then once I've done that, I can go on to my fiction. So that meant I read a really varied thing. And I had mentors over the years. Aside from the college work that I did, which was very technical and was very, educational and academic, I had people who were like, no, I need you to read these books. I need you to read A Brief History of Everything. And I need you to read all these assignments they gave me all these different perspectives. Because some were about history, and some were about science, and some were about mindfulness or self-help. Some were like deep literature, not just like fiction, but like deep, meaningful, almost poetic literature. And there's a list on my link tree of the books that changed my life. And there's even like a, kind of crappy fiction on there because it was the first time I read a crappy fiction. And I realized just how good it could be and just how good for my mental health it was. Just abandon everything else and just read this book. Like, hey, my life was busy. I was in school. I was tutoring. I was helping. You know what? I was going to take this hour, this 2 hours every day for myself and read and enjoy it. I found that was really important. And again, just like meditation changed since I got out, it's been difficult to read. I mean, I'm doing a podcast. This is actually a great book if you're ever interested. Psychology of Money. I'm helping a guy go through a podcast about that because I found that my desire to continue to learn has not ceased or changed, but my willingness or my time or my activity to continue to learn is lower than it used to be. So I have to make time. I've got a whole bookshelf full of books that I want to read. I'll watch educational stuff. I'll watch YouTube stuff. I'll watch podcasts because I found it's really important to continue to expand. Because if I stay the person that I am for the rest of my life, it's no different really than having stayed the person I was when I went into prison at 18 years old. Like, I don't want to be me tomorrow. I want to be a bigger, better, like, wiser, kinder, more loving version of me. I want to know more things. I want to have more understanding. I want to be able to help more people. I want to be able to help myself more. For example, the reason that I got a psychology degree, the reason I started studying psychology in college was because I wanted to know what was wrong with me. My fundamental feeling was that I was flawed and I was broken and there was something wrong with me. And the actions that I had taken seemed to represent that. Like, I had caused great harm and gone to prison. So what was wrong with me? And as I started to heal, and I'm still, more than 20 years later in the process of healing that and going to therapy and trying to figure out how to move past the past, I wanted to say, hey, what happened to these people? Because that's the most important thing. And there's a book about it by Oprah and a doctor. It says the question isn't what's wrong with you. The question is what happened to you. And I've come to understand that my trauma is not about what's wrong with me. It's about the things that happened to me. It's about the resources I didn't have. It's about the support I didn't have. It's about the coping skills I didn't have. And as I can go back and kind of like re-parent myself and re-experience that and re-heal myself, I'm in a different place. And as I experience that myself, I realize we can do that. Like, we can all do that. This is all a process of us trying to find a way to heal each other. And prison can be a very exploitive place, but so can the world. So can a Fortune 500 company. So can anything. So in that place, there were people who were exploiting others, and there were also people who were helping and healing and guiding and mentoring others. So out here in the world, that's what I look for. I don't look to make a quick buck and figure out how to do something. How can I add value to someone else's life? How can I engage in an activity that will add value to my life? How can I find a community of people who are doing the same thing? How can we make ourselves stronger? How can we make ourselves better? How can we find a way to make ourselves bigger so we can help more people? That's the question. So meditation, exercise, reading, they're all about how do we become bigger and better versions of ourselves? How do we take on more tasks? How do we accomplish more? How do we be kinder? How do we be better people? It's really that simple. And it took me going to prison and spending, 19 years of my life and what was supposed to be 32 years of my life to learn that. But not only learn it like abstractly, learn it in experience. Because I had to be in a place where I was struggling and I was suffering and I didn't have the stimulation to fully appreciate what it was, to have the opportunity to sit and take that pause, or to have the opportunity to do those push-ups or lift that weight or play that soccer, do whatever it was, and have the opportunity to pick up that book and be transported to a different land or to a different person's mind or to a different level of understanding on whatever topic I was looking at. And that is why the three things that got me through prison continue to be three things that make my life better every single day.